Hey guys, I'm Little Art Demon and welcome to my channel. And how are you doing today? I hope you're doing great, and today I'll be sharing with you another one of my obsessions. If you follow the channel for a while, then you know that I love good omens, but that's not the only story that resides in my heart. And a few years ago, something effectively changed my life. But before getting into it, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe so you don't miss future videos. Let's get started. Alright, as you may have read on the title, this little obsession of mine is Webtoon. But I think I need to go back a little in time to give you an idea of how I got there in the first place. When I was a really young kid, my mom would read stories to me before going to bed pretty much every day. As I grew up, we started to read together, I liked it, and it was a good way to practice reading outside of school. And of course, as I grew up, the books grew with me. Instead of reading as many kids' stories, I started to read adventure books. I read a lot of the famous five. My aunt has an old collection, so I would borrow them every once in a while. But the books that marked me more were the Fairy Oak collection. It's a lovely story about witches and these two twin sisters learning how to control their powers. But there's a lot of mystery and a big evil coming. I know a lot of people grew up reading Harry Potter, but Fairy Oak was my Harry Potter. I have the main trilogy and 3 out of 4 of the following books. I haven't read them in a long time, but I would love to reread them one day and finish my collection. I'm actually finding it hard to get that last book, it's sold out everywhere. I'm not sure if it will be back in stock one day, but I hope I can find it eventually. But anyway, I used to read a lot as a kid, and I always loved it. I would spend hours with my mom in libraries. She would pick a drama book and would sit with me in the kids section as I read every single book around. But eventually, when school started to take more of my time, I stopped reading as much. I would spend my time doing homework or drawing, for example, and besides those collections, I barely read. Until I didn't read at all, besides the occasional book report for school or when I would buy a new book in the book fair at school. But back in my teenage years, I got introduced to this little app called Wattpad. And listen, I'm not going to sit here and talk good or bad about the stories in there, but it got me back to reading, and it is what got me into horror stories and mythology. I know a lot of people read fanfics there of One Direction and stuff, but I was an emo kid reading about how the tooth fairy is terrifying and will come into your room to turn you into a smoothie if you don't put your teeth under your pillow. And I'm not going to say that I'm not like other girls because that's just annoying. I read some fanfiction as well, just not One Direction. And I wrote a lot of fanfiction too in there. But I think what I really liked about Wattpad is that when I started a story, it would update little by little. The thing is, I have a problem. And it is that I can't stop reading. If I start a book and I like it, I'll spend hours in a row reading it until it ends. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I already struggle to manage my time. If I decide to read a couple of pages, I'll find myself at 3 in the morning sobbing over a book. So I think that's what I liked about Wattpad. It would give me a little bit to read at a time. Eventually I stopped using Wattpad as much, I didn't find as much interest there, and the app wasn't working very well, to be honest. So for some years I didn't read stories or books. That was until 4 years ago. It was 2020 and I had just gotten into college. And someone mentioned to me about a story called Freedom. I looked it up and found that I could read it on Webtoon. So I read all the chapters available, they were only around 10 back then, and I loved it. It's a lovely story about this world where everybody has 2 bodies, one male and one female, and they can switch between them until they turn 21. Then they have to pick one of the bodies and stick with that one. But the main character doesn't want to pick, they want both bodies. So we follow them in their journey to find a cure. And that's how I got into Webtoon. And after having the app installed on my phone, I started adding new stories. I actually counted for this video and I have read or am currently reading over 100 Webtoons, and that's just a small percentage of the list that I have and need to get started on. Is it true that I binged over 200 chapters on Webtoon overnight? I wouldn't deny that. But for the most part, I can do it in a calm manner. It became the start of my day. I would wake up at around 6 to go to college almost every day, so before actually starting everything, I would open my phone and see the new updates. I would read them in bed first thing in the morning. It honestly made me very excited for the next day. This is going to sound a little bit depressing, and I don't want to bring the mood of the video down, but sometimes the only thing that kept me going was knowing that I would wake up and have a new chapter to read. I made sure to have stories updating every day of the week. Most of them update weekly, so I would try not to leave any day out. Having something to look forward to is important, even if it sounds a little silly. And I still read them to this day. I accompanied some stories from start to end, I read some finished ones too, and I follow some that are just in the beginning. I always love to find a new story to love. The art is always so good, and there are so many talented people working to make their stories come to life. I find it very magical. And I know that Webtoon has some problematic things in terms of how they treat their artists there. It's truly unfortunate how it works sometimes. But all those stories that I read really inspired me into making my own comic. I've always loved writing and drawing, so making a comic seems like a perfect fusion. And that's basically all that I was reading until my birthday earlier this year. My friends got me the Good Omens book back in April, and I was going to binge it, but I knew that if I started I wasn't going to be able to stop. It happens with shows, books, stories of any kind, and what I end up doing is pushing it off. It's something that I'm trying to work on because there are shows that I want to watch and books I want to read, but it feels impossible to do it and still have time to do things I have to do. I'm going to start on a full-time job really soon, and that will take more time away from me, but maybe I can take a book with me to read at lunch break. I'm still unsure, but I would like to read more. I started to read a couple of Good Omens fanfics, but not a lot of them. I don't have a huge list of books I'd like to read either, but there are definitely a few that I would like to take my time to appreciate, including Fairy Oak. And as a side note, if you never heard about those books, they're from the same author as the one from the comics and Disney show Witch, the one where each of the 5 girls has an elemental power. This collection isn't a comic, but there is a little bit of art in the books. It's something I would love to include in my stories when I publish them one day. Basically, in the middle of the book, there are 2 sections with images. They change with every book, but there are family photo albums or diaries or magic assignments for their classes. I don't have an hard time imagining characters or scenes based off descriptions, but having some amazing drawings as a base is awesome. It's like the drawings come to life in my head and I can create a vivid moment. I always imagine what I read, but when there's no visual reference, it's like watching a video in 360p and it has some lag to it, while if there's an image of the characters, even if it's a small one, it's a 4K movie. But I think I'm done rambling for this video. I drew myself surrounded by a lot of different stories I've read and characters, most from Webtoon since that was the main inspiration from this video. I feel like I stranded away from the topic, but I hope it didn't get too confusing. So thank you for watching until the end. Please comment book or Webtoon suggestions down below. And since you're down there, leave your like and subscribe. Next week's video is going to be fun. But that's it for now. Thank you again so much for watching. I truly appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!